Hello and welcome to the second part in my little drawing tutorial series. If you want to learn how to draw realistic pictures the easy way, I think I can help you. In this part, I'll show you how I create reference images for my drawings. I'll start with a brief introduction with a couple good things to know before sourcing images. Then I'll go over the tools and software I use to make reference images and why. After that, I'll get into how I found the perfect image to draw. Then I'll show you the full process of turning that image into the reference image, along with a few more examples of reference images I made in the past, the meaning behind them, and the drawings that came from them. Then I'll finish with some solid advice for your own unique process and a quick rundown of the next part in the series. So if that all sounds like something you'd like to learn, then subscribe and follow along as I show you how I draw realism the easy way. Hello again. So a little recap of what I covered in the last part. The ideas note is the best way that I've found to come up with genuine, original, and meaningful ideas for your artwork. It takes all of the effort out of trying to come up with an idea on the spot, and it allows you to traverse the long history of all of the things that you've ever found interesting or things that you have responded to emotionally. And in my opinion, these are the things that make for the most memorable works of art. But before we can pull out a cool idea and put it on paper, there's still a couple more crucial things to take care of. The first is to create a reference image. If you're anything like me, the thought of drawing something realistic without a photo reference is intimidating, daunting, and above all else, completely impossible. And for the couple of real artists out there that may have just heard me say that, don't worry, I can sense how much that triggered you. So in the spirit of full transparency and fairness, I will insert a little disclaimer here. This method of drawing from photos is generally seen as cheating by real artists, or the people that have actually spent all of the time and or money to develop this skill to draw something realistic from a live model or just straight from their mind. And I don't want to downplay how valuable of a skill that is. And if drawing the traditional way is what you really want to do, then please, by all means, go for it. It's a beautiful art form, and for humans to grow from cave drawings all the way up to the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel is an incredible testament to our ability to grow and communicate. But what I'm trying to do here, like another well-known god, is to give fire to the commoners. The people that, like myself, don't have years of their lives or tens of thousands of dollars to spend learning a skill that they really just want to do for fun. And if I have to suffer for that, well, I might regret it. Actually, I don't know. Either way, I just want to be sure that I make that distinction before I continue. And in defense of the photo drawing method that I use,
I don't give a hoot
what people think. It doesn't devalue what I get out of successfully capturing something that's inside me and expressing it in an interesting way through the art of drawing. So in that spirit, and in the same way I approach everything else in my life, why make things more difficult than they need to be? Of course, you could get by just drawing a photo that you found or something that you took or a portrait that you were sent for a commission, in which case you could basically just skip the rest of this part. But we want to make stuff that's original and interesting and stands out, like pop star Sabrina Carpenter, but she looks like she has the omniscience of a super being for some reason. I'm sure some of you can already see where I'm going with this, but the way I do this is through photo manipulation, like with Photoshop, for example. And I'll put another disclaimer here, this one much more important. If you plan to sell work that you make using this photo editing method, even though the images will be manipulated and then drawn, just to cover your own butt, don't use photos that you didn't take yourself or you don't have explicit permission from the original creator to use. Because with copyright laws that may be in your area, legally, you're going to have a bad time. So depending on the complexity of what you want to make, aside from buying paper and pencils and all that, this will be where your first real expenses may come in. At the very least, there are free image editing applications out there that could suit your needs without having to spend anything. I personally use Photoshop for a very long time. It was and still is my favorite application for editing images. But when Adobe switched to the Creative Cloud subscription service, paying $30 a month for Photoshop just didn't really sit well with me. So luckily I had an iPad and an Apple Pencil, And while Procreate is typically marketed as a drawing app, it also has all of the basic image adjustment and manipulation tools that I use the most in Photoshop. I found it to be a cheap yet suitable replacement for Photoshop that still had everything that I needed. And the best part is Procreate is a one-time payment of under $20 Canadian, last time I checked, instead of like $30 a month forever for Photoshop. That was a very easy choice for me to make. The iPad I use is an 11-inch iPad Air from a few years ago. The 256 gigabyte version ended up costing me about $1,300. Plus the Apple Pencil was like another $120. It's great with the pressure sensitivity and everything though, and iPads are generally versatile and powerful touchscreen computers, so I still get a lot of use out of it. So this isn't just like a $1,500 image editing machine. I get it if that's a lot to invest for you, but my main point is you will need a way of editing images. And like I said before, there's still free applications out there that are perfectly fine, like GIMP. This is just how I like to work, and these will be the things that I'll be using in my demonstrations. Okay, so there I am, chilling with my big dreams of making a drawing tutorial series with a really cool drawing as a centerpiece, but I didn't know yet who it would be of. I started thinking of famous people that I actually follow and have portraits floating around that fit what I'm going for. All of these were great options that I would have loved to draw, but while the images that I could find of them were good, like they didn't really like hit me in the right spot. Plus, aside from Timothée Chalamet, none of them are really mainstream celebrities that were famous enough to get me the exposure I wanted. I needed more. So I resorted to just looking up the charts for the most popular musicians of today. I found a few promising images of Billie Eilish, Ariana Grande, and Dua Lipa, but then Sabrina Carpenter popped into my mind. I'm usually not that big on mainstream pop music, but her song Espresso is genuinely a favorite of mine. So I found some value in that. Unlike all the other mainstream options, she was the only one that had a song that I actually enjoyed. Plus, she has that like classic movie star look, and I'm not afraid to admit that I have a bit of a crush on her. So yeah, she became my muse. So I started Googling images of her, and I quickly found that there wasn't much around that I could work with. I needed something that sold enlightenment and drama and discovery and ethereality, but all I was really finding were just basic glamour shots and, you know, everyday portraits and red carpet stuff and all that. But I refused to give up. If the perfect image of her didn't exist, then I would go and make one myself. So I found her agent's number, and with some clever social engineering, I found out where she lives. I got my camera and I bought a plane ticket, and I staked out her. I'm just kidding. I just started watching her music videos. Cinematography is one of my favorite art forms. It's literally like moving pictures. So I figured that within these music videos would be the treasure that I was seeking. And I found my shot pretty quickly, actually. I started off with the video for Espresso, naturally. But all the shots in that one turned out to be kind of plastic. And, you know, it was like a mix of the Barbie movie plus a Hollister ad. And none of that really worked for what I was going for. But the next video I tried was the one for Please, Please, Please. And while I don't care for that song nearly as much, this was where I found my gold. I came across this scene where they entered the bad guy headquarters, and immediately this moment stood out to me. I had to do a little frame by frame skipping to find the perfect moment, but there she was. So compared to other reference images that I made in the past, this one was like dead simple. I took a screenshot, and then specifically in the iPhone photo editor, I applied the Noir filter, the one that's like built in. I made a couple extra minor adjustments to get the contrast just how I like it, and then I imported it into Procreate. From there, I got my Apple Pencil, and then using the soft brush and the medium airbrush, I was able to draw in the light coming from the eyes. And then I also kind of darkened the background a bit. I added a bit of a vignette, which wasn't really necessary, but I just wanted to get, like, when I started drawing it, I knew I would be just blacking out the background. So I just wanted to get a good sense of how that would look and how the negative space would balance and whatever. And finally, on a layer with the overlay blend mode, I drew in a faint layer of white over all of the highlights in her hair. And then I played around with like a Gaussian blur and the opacity of the layer to add a very subtle glow to keep in line with the ethereal vibe I was going for. And yeah, that was it. I had my reference image. I realized that might have been kind of underwhelming in its simplicity. So here are a few examples of much more interesting reference images that I made in the past in the drawings that they produced, just to give you a better idea of what's possible. This one I titled The Arrival Fallacy. It started off as a collage of some guy looking out the window and a few cloud images I combined to depict this concept of the arrival fallacy, which is a term for that feeling you get when you achieve a goal you've been working toward for a really, really long time. But when you get there, you thought it would be all rainbows and sunshine and you'd feel a hard transition to a new happy chapter of your life. But in reality, you feel no different. And it's like, well, that's it. And this one that I have hanging up behind me is called The Call of the Void. It used a scene from the movie Candyman as the base image. It's a close-up of the eyes of the lead actor, Virginia Madsen, and I added 2 extra elements to it. The spirally eye thing, which I stole from the opening of Vertigo, and a few tears I stole from a statue of the Virgin Mary. I combined these elements to depict toxicity from the eyes of the victim, whether that be in the form of addiction, delusion, false love, or self-loathing. This is the irresistible pull toward that which harms you. So I haven't really been using this method for that long of a time compared to how long I've actually been drawing. So here are a couple that I made that haven't become completed drawings yet. They're actually the only 2 I've ever made that I did completely from scratch with my own photography. This one I abandoned a while ago. It's meant to have similar themes to the Golden Path. I loosely patched together 2 photos of myself in an attempt to show the ongoing push and pull between the hedonist and the wise man in all of us. The wise man being the conscientious, forward-thinking, and ambitious conscience. The part of you that knows the right thing to do and seeks growth and to walk the hard path to success. He tries to bestow this enlightenment and discipline onto the hedonist, while the hedonist is petulant and resistant to accepting the truth. He can't tolerate change, he rejects the journey, and remains blissfully blinded by attachments to his existing relationships, his possessions, and the comfortable life that he's used to. It was heavily inspired by this visual from The Lighthouse, which itself was inspired by this piece called Hypnosis by Sasha Schneider. It's meant to be very dramatic, like a Renaissance painting, and I definitely want to pick up this project again in the future, ideally when my hair grows back out. It's probably the most creative that I have ever been. I was figuring out how to photograph myself and model and embody the expressions that I needed to communicate the message of this piece. And I was also really learning how to light complex scenes using the couple lamps that I have in my bedroom and this little starter Nikon camera that I use. And I don't know how I'll do it, but whenever I get back to it, I want to make this thing huge, 4 by 6 feet or something, monumental. This would be my new magnum opus. And this one currently in progress behind me, it kind of went on a hiatus when I got this idea to start doing this drawing tutorial series, but yet again, more enlightenment symbolism. You could probably attach the same meaning to this one as the Golden Path. This one is just from the first person perspective, and I made this reference image by just taking a POV shot of me raising my hands to a pot light in my basement ceiling, and I actually tried to do a whole space thing in the background with the Hubble Deep Field, but the lighting never really looked right to me, so I abandoned that. I just added some lens flare and brightened up the light a bit, and that was that. I'll probably be picking this one back up again when I finish this series. So that's all I have for reference images for you, for real this time. I realized that my method may have some extra expenses that you weren't expecting, with the iPad and Procreate and everything. And you might not have been expecting there to be digital art involved in drawing realism. But these are just the tools and the skills that I had available to myself when I was naturally developing this process. I'm a really big fan of being frugal and resourceful, and this means using what you already have available to yourself to do what you need to do before resorting to buying a new tool or paying somebody to offload some of the work. It's also a really great opportunity to gain new skills for yourself, and who knows, you might even develop a new hobby or interest that could end up being very lucrative to you. For example, before I started shooting myself for that one reference image, I had no idea how to do manual photography, but I looked up a couple of YouTube videos and I messed around on my own with my starter Nikon camera that I got from Costco like forever ago, and I learned enough to get by. So I encourage you to reflect on what you're already good at. What skills and tools and even people do you have available that can assist you in making interesting work? Think about that over the next couple of weeks while I work on the next part of this series, which is the grid. It's literally the most boring part of this whole thing, but it is critical, so I will try to make it quick. After that though, I will finally get into the drawing, the part that I know everyone and their mom has been waiting for. So subscribe and hit that alert thing to follow along. Like this video if you learned something, and leave a comment if you have a question or if you think I missed something. And you will see me in the next one. Bye.